Okay, hi Shelley. We're just
Hi,
going to have
David.
an improv conversation.
Okay.
I've told you how much I appreciated how both professionally and when we've talked personally, you've faced and actually laid out some kind of blueprints, I think, for anybody, but for healthcare providers, and particularly you're a psychologist, I'm a psychologist. How do we deal with facing end of life with our clients professionally, but also how do you, everybody does it differently. How do we face this big thing that my Zen friends call the great mystery of knowing that you have a terminal diagnosis besides the usual terminal diagnosis of being alive.
Right.
And this is quite a day to do it. I'm sure you know of Thich Nhat Hanh,
Yeah, he
Zen,
just
who
died.
a couple days ago, who died and has wonderful things to in his writings that have helped many people. So maybe would it be okay to start with just saying what how it happened that you found out that you had a terminal diagnosis?
Okay. So I always tell people feel free to ask me any questions. I told all my patients, feel free to ask me any questions and a number of people did want to know, how did you find out? Because I think that is an existential issue for all human beings, is that idea of how will I know? And so I think people are always very curious about how you find out. So basically, I had um, gotten my second COVID shot, the vaccine. And the next day after I got the vaccine, I started to feel pain. And so I just assumed it was because of the vaccine. And I just assumed, oh, it will go away. But the pain never stopped. And after a month, I decided I better talk to my doctor. And my doctor at first thought, oh, it's probably heartburn. And I said, no, I've actually had heartburn before. I know what that feels like. This does not feel like that. And she said, well, take some Prilosec for a week. And so I did that, and the pain was getting worse. And so that's when she said, well, let's do some tests. So there was a series of tests. They tested my urine, they tested my blood, and then those tests determined that I needed an ultrasound, and the ultrasound test determined that I needed, a biopsy. And so it just kept escalating. And so finally, when they did I believe it was the biopsy, is where they told me that I have pancreatic cancer. So, so each step of the way, there was a sense of, oh, this is, worse than, you know, was what was originally thought. At first, they thought, oh, maybe you have a gallbladder problem, maybe you have gallstones, maybe you have, people were supposing different possibilities, but it kept escalating. Where no, this is more serious. Then it became clear that they could confirm that I had pancreatic cancer. And
And
so
they gave you a stage at that point, or does that come later?
it was a very long process. They could not give me a stage right away. I've had so many different incremental pieces of information. It was very difficult to actually get information. Again, it's during COVID, so you're not meeting with anyone in person. You're doing everything over the internet. It was very much of a intrusion in the whole process, where going into I had to go to the hospital to get this biopsy, and they wouldn't allow anyone in with me, and I had to wait by myself alone in a room for 3 hours. It was just, it really made it worse to have this happen during the time of COVID. So, and everybody you talk to says, well, that's not my particular specialty. You have to wait and talk to this doctor. I had to talk to, 6, 7 doctors for each individual thing. So it was really a difficult medical journey to actually find out that I have less than 6 months to live. It took at least 2 months to actually from the time. So it took like a month to figure out, okay, there's something seriously wrong. And then it took like another 2 months to figure out, okay, I actually have less than 6 months to live. So that's how that happened. So that part was very disturbing, of course, medically, and existentially. I think what it triggered for me was, okay, once I got that clear information, like, okay, I have many, many decisions to make. So I had, my first thought is, oh my God, I have all my patients. And my first thought was, I can't deal with my personal issues until I deal with what am I going to do about all my patients first. So,
and you've been a psychologist in private practice for how many years?
Since July 1st, 2006.
Yeah.
So it was about, 16 years, something like that. So, I have, I've had 750 patients over the course of my practice. And, at any one time I have about 50 patients, coming in and out. And, I have a full 7-day-a-week practice. So really it was, I had to deal with all the patients that were currently scheduled. And so I said, I have to focus on my patients that are currently on my calendar, and deal with whoever ends up calling for an appointment. I'll have to deal with them when that they call. But, so I realized I have to come up with something I'm going to tell my patients. How am I going to tell them this? And so it was, I had to really think about, obviously each person is different. So, I realized certain patients, do everything over email, arranging appointments and things like that. And we often communicate over email. So I realized, okay, certain people I can tell over email, but some people don't do email. And I realized I'm going to have to tell them over the phone. And I realized, this is going to be causing people harm to just get this information over the phone. And in my life, I've been told people are dying over the phone, loved ones of mine. So I know that is a horrible way to hear this information. So I was very aware of thinking, okay, how will each of these people need to hear this? I have people that they just do texting. It was like, texting is out. It really required juggling all these different communication methods. We could spend 2 hours talking about that. But at any rate, what I realized is most of my people, I realized the best way was to compose an email message that I send them the day before our scheduled session. And so, I can, I actually, in preparation to talk to you, I printed out a few of the messages that I sent to people. So you get an idea of what I said. And so I had like a template that I sent each person based some of the original the first paragraph the same, and then I customized it for each person, part of it.
Oh.
Okay, so most of the people, the first part of the message, so the subject line says bad news. Okay, because I know they need to have a heads up. Okay, because I know most of my patients who use email, if it said something like bad news, they would either not read it, or they would be prepared, like, before I open this, at least I know what it is. So I knew that would be helpful to a lot of my people, to prepare them to open the message. So the subject line says bad news. And then I just said, start out with their name, whatever their name is, Joe or whatever. I have some bad news to tell you. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and I only have a short time to live. Each of them, I said something slightly different, but it says, a lot of them I said, please accept my apologies for this abrupt change in our relationship. It hurts me to have to share this bad news. I wish this wasn't happening. So that seemed a good way to go
kind
deeper.
of a beautiful way. That touched me just then.
Yeah. So I knew that I needed to connect with them in a human way, because anyone would know this is a horrible thing to have to tell someone. And so then the third paragraph is something like, the only good thing is that I know you have learned a lot in the short time that we've been talking together. And we can still have our sessions scheduled for tomorrow. But that will probably have to be our last session. Okay. And I said, in the last session, we'll review the progress you've made, because I don't want you to forget what you've learned. So what I learned in doing this, because I had to do this for 40 patients, that there was a couple of people that I thought, this certain people, they're going to need more than one session. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So a few of them, I said, listen, if you need more time, we can have another one in next time, but let's see what we can talk about tomorrow or whatever. But every single, no one wanted more than one session. I think it was too painful for everyone. That the one last session was so intense that it was like they couldn't open up again in another session. Yeah, they all expressed, I would say, there was only one or two people that there was one person that basically freaked out and couldn't respond at all, and just didn't show up for the last session, and just couldn't handle it. And I sent them a message saying, I understand this was probably too much to deal with, but I know how you feel. I know you long enough to know how you feel, and it's okay. So I needed to, and then there was nothing else from that person. And I knew he needed me to acknowledge that, because I do know how he feels. I mean, I have a number of patients I've been seeing for years. And so I know he was the kind of person that expressed very frequently, oh, I'm so grateful for our work together. He didn't need to repeat that. So I know how he feels. So, there were each person, I had a different relationship with each of them. So some of them, needed to say things in the last session, and some of them didn't. One woman was, inappropriate in that she had boundary issues where she was, her response was something like, I looked up your home address on the internet, and I want to come over and feed you soup, and I want to bring you take care of you. And, she had a, much more, the opposite kind of I'm going to smother you with love kind of, response. And so I had to, put boundaries on her and say, that's, I appreciate your intentions, but, that's just not appropriate at this time. And, and so, with her and with a lot of people, I had to, connect them to another therapist. That was the other challenge I have is getting them referrals, because like someone like this woman, I was like, she needs to transfer immediately to someone else. Luckily with her, I was able to identify someone else I thought would be good. And she did connect with that person right away. And so I was able to say, talk to your new therapist about how you're feeling. I said, I know you're grieving, and this is, your way of trying to stay, connected to me. But I know this is part of the grieving process. And it's, that this is reminding you of all the people in your life who have died, and that you've lost connection with. So I know there's a lot to talk about, and this will be a good way to connect to your new therapist. So some people I had to really kind of help facilitate them taking their emotions and using it to be with someone else, that I can't do that anymore. So that's why I thought I would use this opportunity to say a little bit about what I did do, because I think obviously when it happened to me, I was like, I have no idea what to do. They're not really, there needs to be a graduate school session, not a session, but a whole course on dealing with this. And I think, I did feel I had to reinvent the wheel. The only good thing was that I was very aware of like, I have to do this. I have to figure this out. And so I just, had this intense feeling of urgency. So I did, and I just used what I felt with my patients to guide me in what does each person need from me in this moment. And so, things like, for people that I saw many, many years, I was able to talk about, I know you're in a stronger place now than you were when we first connected. And I know you have the resilience now to deal with the ongoing challenges in your life. I needed to reinforce some of the things that I really did know, that I know they had grown over time. I said, I know you have more confidence in dealing with the challenges in your life. It's made me happy to see you grow and change for the better over time. I've seen you, I've seen you so many years, it feels bizarre that I won't ever see you again. Just being able to validate the feelings that I knew that they would have. I'm glad I was able to be there for you during your long divorce process. I'm glad I was a witness to your changes in emotional maturity over time. I know you're capable of commitment, and I hope you can find someone else who's capable of that. And that's why I thought email was good, because it's a document that they can come back to. So I made sure that I wrote things to people that I knew who use written materials. In the last sessions, a number of them said, oh, I'm going to keep this by my bedside so I can read it again when I get discouraged. And so we talked about, that's why I sent them these things the day before. And then in the last session, reinforced this again, and to say, let's talk about your progress and how we can make sure that this doesn't become a relapse into your old, unhealthy ways of coping with things. I said, the only good thing is I know you've made great progress, and it's been a pleasure to watch you free yourself from all the old patterns in your life, to say that, things like that. What I did hear people say is, I've never talked to anybody about death before like this. I've never, like that we would talk, I asked them, who have you known that was dying or died? What did happen? And so I would say 99% said, we never talked about it. It was just something that you just didn't talk about. It was just always something to avoid as a terrible thing. And so, one thing I do want to mention is that when I put my original notice to the San Francisco Psychological Association, with the subject line, I think it was telling my patients I'm dying, that I received an outpouring of support and messages from my colleagues, other psychologists, which was wonderful. And people were very kind, and one of the people who responded was our colleague Eileen Serlin. And one thing she said, which was very important, was that she talked about how she had talked to patients about cancer, and that she said, I know that it's scary to talk about it, but she said, I think I've had some very good conversations, and it was important to talk about it. And it was helpful to them. That's what she said. Something about that. It was helpful to them. Okay. And so that got me, I think she said something like, we've had some profound conversations or something like that. And so her saying that really helped me bring more consciousness to what these last sessions. And I realized, this is a therapeutic issue for them. And I need to, really think about how this is helping them to talk about it. Because before that, I was thinking, oh my God, I'm causing them harm by having to tell them this.
And that the opportunity.
So it's like, I knew I needed to be thoughtful about not causing them harm, but she also awakened me to the possibility that this could actually be a very profound therapeutic gift to give them. And so what was amazing was that really that is exactly what happened, that not every single, again, one failed to show up. One just, was not able to respond appropriately. But I would say, 98% of the people had just an amazing, therapeutic session where they opened up about, how, talking about this is something they've never done. And all of the men were sobbing. I've never had the men cry. I was very aware of most of these men are macho kind of guys. And they were all crying. And it really, they were saying things like, I could never talk to my mother like this when she was dying, or, my grandmother, they were saying I wish my mother had been able to talk about this when she died. Various people in their lives, who they didn't get that opportunity. And so they were able to really, talk about our relationship and what they had gotten out of being in therapy with me, and the individual, feeling they had about me, but they were able to expand it to the idea of death in general, how we don't talk about this, and that they were really glad that we talked about it, and that, they said, I'm going to live a better life because of this. You're helping me realize I can't take each day for granted, that I have to appreciate everything more. They were really, you could tell they were saying, this is now, because this happened, I reached out to my family and said, I need your support. People, they were each reaching out to other people in their lives and they said, now I feel more connected to, my support people, because you've given me the courage to talk about this. So I'm going to talk about it more with them. And, you're helping, my whole family, I mean, it's just people were very effusive and, it wasn't like they're just saying these things because it's the
No, it
right
was
thing
real.
to say. It was
Very real.
It was very heartfelt. I mean, everybody was sobbing. The only people that didn't really sob were like people from an Asian ancestry who, clearly were taught, you don't do that. But I could tell they were feeling it. And, you just could tell that everybody really was profoundly touched. And I had people saying, thank you for being so honest about what's happening. I had people say, I had people who died, but they just disappeared and I didn't even know what happened or, why they died or, there was no way to get any questions answered. So it was a good thing. They told me the few options that I had and I, explored whatever the options were, but I didn't want to do any of the things that they had to offer. I did explore it. I talked, there's something called Whipple surgery, and I talked to someone who had Whipple surgery, and I definitely did not want to do that. I've seen many people in my family go through chemotherapy. I did not want to do that. I explored, radiation. I didn't want to do that. There's something called a nerve block. I explored that. I didn't want to do that. So I'm aware that what I've really been aware of, it is now 5 months since my start of the pain that happened. So, it's been, like 2 months since they finally told me that I have pancreatic cancer. It's been almost 3 months, but at any rate, and I'm just not taking anything for the pain. I have a very long medical history. I was when I was born. I have severe atopic dermatitis, which is, my entire body, and, allergies, asthma. I'm one of those people who will die if I eat nuts. I've almost died many, many times from that. Anaphylaxis, yeah. So I have a very, very long history of medical trauma from, all kinds of treatments and failures of treatment I also apparently have some sort of problem with taking opioids. They just for the last, I just tried another experiment the last week of using Dilaudid, which had zero effect, zero. I tried 2 milligrams, 0 effect, 4 milligrams, 0 effect, 6 milligrams, 0 effect, 8 milligrams, 0 effect. So now the doctors are saying, well, we're going to have to try something else. But I've mostly had a terrible reaction to opioids, where I just have extreme nausea, even though I'm taking anti-nausea medications. I just have a very long history of problems with that. But my whole life, I've been in extreme physical discomfort because of my skin conditions. And so, where you have constant itch. So, if you, most people, I try to give them a reference point of poison ivy. If you've ever had poison ivy, that's like a short-term experience of itching. Okay. So I had itching like poison ivy for 60 years, all the time. My entire life was itch all the time. It doesn't go away. And so the only reason I've had any relief is in the last, when I was 60, they finally, allowed me to be on prednisone every day. So I take a low dose of prednisone, 5 milligrams every day. And that's the only thing that has ever removed the itch. But my whole
And
life, they always
how,
said, you should not take it every day. You can't take it every day. So I've only really lived a normal life for the last like 5 years. So
okay.
before that, I had no idea what it's like to like not be itching 24/7. Like I didn't know like that you could actually not feel that. I just thought I didn't know what it was be like. Because of that history, I was always drawn to, learning coping mechanisms psychologically. Because I tried everything physical and nothing works. So I was fortunate to, learn psychological things. And various obviously there's a zillion psychological things, but what happened to help me the most is a technique called focusing by Eugene Gendlin, and he wrote his book back in the 1970s. And if anyone's not familiar with it, it's a very short book, but it was based on the idea of something called the felt sense. And the felt sense is something that he identified during research on why does therapy help some people and not others. And it was what he came up with was this idea of some people would use language that was like, it felt right or it didn't feel right. And he realized there's certain kinds of people, they have a felt sense when something is right for them or something is not right. And so I really resonated with that because that's how I lived my life, is by sensing what feels right for me and what does not feel right to me. And so, so I was intrigued by that premise. And so, and the idea that this is a body oriented technique where you really, to me, he didn't use this word, but it's the word interoception. So interoception is your ability to perceive your internal sensations. Like we usually use that in terms of, I feel hungry, or I feel thirsty, or I feel, I have to poop, or whatever, your internal sensations. But for me, it also refers to all of the internal sensations of, I feel angry, I feel frustrated.
Emotion as well as sensation.
Emotional, yes. So to me, these are integrated. My body and my emotions are very integrated. I have a very strong body-mind connection of, and I'm really aware of what is my body and what's my emotions and what's my mental thoughts. So because I've had to really tune in to what am I feeling? Is this itch, or am I just frustrated with something? Is it, am I itchy and I need to physically do something for the itch? Or am I just like anxious because I have something I have to do tonight and I'm worried about it? Like I've always had to sort of clarify, am I feeling a physical sensation, or is it something else psychological, or is it a mixture of both? Okay, so a lot of times it's a mixture of both. And so I would use the analogy of like a ball of yarn. I have to untangle, I have to pull out, well, this piece is this and this piece is that. Is this necessary suffering or unnecessary suffering? The judgment is the unnecessary suffering. So part of me learning to work with my body mind experiences is getting clarity on, is this actual physical necessary suffering, or is it an unnecessary adding to what I'm feeling by some sort of interpretation or some sort of secondary reaction, overreaction? So my past experiences made it very clear what's necessary suffering and what is unnecessary suffering. It's much easier to live with the necessary suffering if you can clear away the unnecessary suffering that you can recognize of, oh, that's just an adding on, that's a mental or emotional reaction or interpretation. So just remove it. So I have a feeling of sweeping it away. So that's really how I've been dealing with the pain, is to just be accepting. And really it's even beyond accepting, it's a welcoming of it. So it's an embracing of it in like a very it's a way of being interested, curious, and open to what is it. Okay. And what does it have to tell me? What does it want? What does it need? Does it just want me to keep it company? You know, the language I tend to use is that the pain doesn't want to be alone. It wants me to keep it company. It wants me to be present with it. That part of the necessary suffering is this feeling of solitude. And that if you can keep the pain company, it feels less, it reduces the pain. It's like a harm reduction technique where because part of the pain is also body memories from previous pain. Okay, so it's really you can't you can't always sort out what is my current pain from what is my body's, is it triggering body memories of old pain. So sometimes that's what focusing does. It helps you realize that oh, this pain is reminding me of an old pain from some other time. So the reason it's so intense right now is it's an echo from past. It's sensing, okay, what is this pain? Is it just something that needs to vent? It just needs to have a surge of expression right now. It needs to express itself. And does it just need my attention and acknowledging that I hear you, I feel you, I see you. Yeah, you needed someone to confirm that you exist. You're there. You want someone to acknowledge you, confirm you exist. And so once you get that acknowledgement, you can sort of settle down. You know, when I was a child, I was reading a lot of spiritual things, and I was a fan of Gandhi, and I would read about bodhisattva, and I remember as a child feeling like, oh yes, that I don't want to. I will live as long as other people are suffering. I want to share that suffering with other people, and that's the right way to be. And I remember that, I would sleep on the floor because, I would tell my mother, well, other people have to sleep on the floor, so I should share that with them. And my mother was very angry because she's like, you know how hard I work to give you a nice bed? What are you, crazy? You're sleeping on the floor? What's wrong with you? What have I done wrong? This kind of thing. She couldn't understand these concepts. But, I had this ever since I was a child, to share people's suffering. I had a very zigzag path here, but, that was always, sort of, I was called for that, and, when my dad died of cancer, I wanted to take on his pain. And I remember saying, just give it to me. Just give it to me. I wanted him to be free of his pain. And I said, I'm stronger. I can take it. Give it to me. And he was like, I wish I could. I've almost died many times from eating nuts. So I've always felt that I wasn't really afraid to die, simply because I'd come so close to it before. And it was always an experience of just letting go and surrendering to the process. And because what I learned from that is, don't fight it, and that just relax. The best thing always in that situation for me was when I realized, I'm having anaphylaxis, and so I might die right now. Is to just really relax, and be as completely physically relaxed as possible, and sort of go into a trance. That's really what helped me, is to. So I would go into what I would call a hypnagogic state, where I would be. I'm conscious, but I've always had this. I really use that time, like as I'm falling asleep, or as I'm waking up, to be. I can hold on to that hypnagogic state where I'm. It's an altered state, but it's a very peaceful state, and so I always associate that with a dying experience, because it feels like it's between worlds. Yes, it's a there's a tenuous connection to the ego. It's tenuous. It's very it's kind of dissociated. It's like an emotionally distant thing. It's like, yeah, I know that person. I have some. I'm familiar with that person, but you're not. You're just. You feel more connected to, like, everything. So it's sort of like having a string that, a very long string that is attached to something, but you're really floating out. You have an anchor that's very, very light, a very, very, loose tether, okay? But you're really out and you're floating, and it feels good. It feels very good, and you're just able to process experience on every level, like intellectual, emotional, and you have a philosophical awareness that's very, very large. I would say when I've used psychedelics when I was young, it didn't feel. It felt more like on psychedelics. It felt too overwhelming. It felt like no boundaries at all, and it was more. It was that big connection, but it felt chaotic and very like too much. There was something about it, and it felt like I needed to figure out, how do I, have some safety in that. It didn't feel as good as, like, my hypnagogic states feel very good. They feel, again, like a safe container. It feels like there's a container, but it's very, very large. When I was a kid, I remember one of my early experiences existentially was being, I guess we were on a camping trip with my family, and we were outside at night under the stars. And I remember I was with my father, and we were looking up at the sky. And it was, one of those places where there was no lights, so you really could see more stars than, you could at my suburban home. And so I remember looking up the sky, and my dad's, I think, I know what it was. At that time, they had this TV show called Ben Casey, and
MD.
Yeah, and one of Dr. Zorba in the beginning would write, man, woman, and he would say infinity. Okay, the sign for infinity would write on a blackboard. Man, woman, earth, infinity, or something like that. And I remember saying to my Dad, what's really infinity? And he just said, look up at the stars. That's infinity. And I looked up, and in that moment, he said something like, it's that it goes on forever, or something like that. And he said something very, very simple like that. But I looked up at the stars, and I felt this, like, I grokked like the idea of infinity. It was like that whole just like Helen Keller with the learning water. It was like infinity, the cosmos. And I felt this I must have been about 8 years old. And I just remember this amazing, intense awareness of the immensity of the universe. And it was like for a second, I felt this, like I felt it. And then the next second, I was like, oh my God, that's too intense. And then I said, and then I shut it down. But I was always remembered that second that I did let it in, I could let it in. And it really, and so I've always gone to planetariums. And, because now that I'm older and more mature, I can go to a planetarium and feel it, in a way I couldn't feel it for an extended period of time when I was a little girl. But now I love to go to the planetarium and be absorbed into that immensity. So to me, that's what death is that you get absorbed into that infinity, that immense infinity that our human brains, I believe, are too small to comprehend the totality of the cosmos. So my beliefs is that humans are too fragile to like hold the voltage of that infinity experience. And so we have to kind of shut it down to some degree, because when you really think about how vast it is, it's beyond our capacities. We're going to blow fuses. So I accept, what you say, the great mystery. I've always say it's a mystery of what what the true cosmos is. I don't believe we are capable of comprehending it. I think every human finds some way of explaining it for themselves, whether it's religion or a faith or a philosophy. I just think of it as all philosophy, that of what helps them tolerate this ongoing uncertainty that we'll never know. We cannot know. And so, but we need to know. That's what being a human is we want to know, we need to know, we need an explanation. So I've always said, well, I hope someday I get a debriefing after this. And we'll see. But, I truly, I believe, what I have, but those are all theoretical ideas. My recent experience has been sort of a building on that foundation, in that my experiential reality, since I've been given this diagnosis, is that I have a felt sense that of my molecules like preparing to disperse. And so that is my felt sense. It's very hard to put into words, but I feel that's the only way I could say it. My molecules are preparing to disperse into the cosmos. There's like some it feels almost physiological, but it's clearly a psychophysiological experience of, it feels like my molecules are sort of slightly expanded. They're like preparing to continue to expand. There's a sense of that something is expanding and opening, like every single cell in my body is starting a journey. And so it's very subtle. I think most people wouldn't be aware of this, but I have such a clarity about my felt sense that I can perceive this on a very like atomic level or something. I know it sounds crazy, but
no, it doesn't at all sound crazy.
Yeah.
I really,
it's a very subtle thing. And so I feel like slight changes in every level, my body, my thoughts, my emotions. I had to really go through a process of understanding what's happening to me. So I've been writing in my journals,
Oh,
and that's been very good. And I've had to sort of, in these hypnagogic states, I've been trying to process, like, how do I conceive of this? Like, I've always been prepared to die, but um, what's changed for me is that for so many years I was really suffering a lot, and I was often, in most of my life, thinking, I'll be so glad when I can die and just be done with all this suffering. And so I was always expecting to be like, have no problem, like just jettisoning everything. But because I've been feeling so good physically these last 5 years, I'm actually having another level of it where it's like, but I'm feeling good now. Now I don't want, now I'm like, oh no, I see why people don't want to die. It's like I'm having a very mixed feeling where I'm aware of, like, oh, I just figured out how to feel good now. Now I have to go. Um, and the other level of it is being aware of, my sense of time is very changed. I'm aware that I now live in a time reference point that other people don't have. Like I talk to you or other people, and I'm aware you're living in a time structure that I used to live in, and I'm not in that anymore. Like, I'm aware I'm in a different group now because, like, I'm aware that, like, in the last 5 years, like, whatever happened, like, okay, yeah, well, I'll do that, someday. Or at some point, well, I'll get around to that. Or if it doesn't happen this week, it's okay. It'll happen at some point soon. I can't use any of those reference points, and I'm very glad I have had those experiences now, because I know I'm so much better prepared for what I'm going through than someone who's never had that. And I can tell from talking to other people who, the way they are imagining what this would be like is so different. Like, it's just been interesting to talk to people, like some people who say things like, so now that you have this, you're going to live less than 6 months. Do you have a bucket list? Are you going to just go and have fun and do whatever never got a chance to do? It's like, no. I was like, number one, I lived my whole life as that. I did everything I always wanted to do because I knew I may never live very long. So I've always done everything I wanted to do. I was never waiting for some retirement to do fun things. That would never have occurred to me, number one. Number two, I have so many things I have to do right now. I don't have time to go have fun or something. Like, I'm just grateful that I actually am not going through any medical procedures, because I am the only suffering I have is this pain. Other than that, I feel fine. I can do everything I want to do. My mind is sharp. I'm in charge of everything that's happening. I'm juggling like 10 different things. I'm juggling attorneys and accountants and doctors, and who's going to deal with helping with my patient files, and who's going to take this in my house, and how do I organize my end of life medications, and how do I'm juggling like 20 different projects that I probably wouldn't be able to do if I was like sedated or going through some sort of medical procedure.
4 hours infusion.
Yeah. And so one of the things I really feel grateful for, and I spend a lot of time writing about what I'm grateful for, is that I got that I am mentally fine right now, still, that I didn't add more medical problems to my my suffering, that I actually have had a certain amount of time. I'm really grateful that some people get this diagnosis and they're dead in a week or 2 weeks or something, a very short time. So I'm really grateful. I've had months, because when I first got it, I thought I better act as if I'm dying next week. You better just zoom, get into gear, overdrive, because you may be dead in a week. You have no idea how much time you have. And so I've been really very, very active in as much as I possibly could from the day I got this diagnosis. So I'm grateful I have the time. I'm grateful I've had, that I lived as long as I did. I'm really grateful, because I really thought I was going to be dead before I was 20. So I'm shocked that, my father died when he was 60. And at the time, I thought he was an old man. And, I was 19 when he died. And, at the time I was like 60, you're an old man. And I remember people saying, oh, your father, it's such a shame he's dying at 60. I was like, what's he going to do after he's 60? I mean, I remember thinking that I didn't understand why people thought that was a short time to live. If you don't mind, I will read a poem.
Oh.
Okay. So before I start the poem, I will say there's an organization called You're Going to Die. And You're Going to Die does public gatherings where people talk about death, and they tell stories, they sing songs, they read poems, they share whatever they need to talk about, in terms of that, an awareness of you're going to die. Okay. And I think they're a beautiful organization. They're here in San Francisco, Bay Area. I think now during COVID, they're doing it over the internet. But they did do them in person. And so they have a little thing they give out. On one side, it says, you're going to die. Okay. And on the other side, it says, you're not dead yet. Okay. So the whole point of it is to raise your consciousness, to be aware that, yes, you're going to die. And we need to be able to talk about the pain of knowing that is going to happen. But we want you to be aware of you're not dead yet. You need to have both so that you can be present in the moment in a more helpful way. There's also something called Death Cafe that I've attended those as well in the past. So I'll just end with a poem that I think I've shared with some people, and they said they thought it was helpful to them. So the author is a man named Jeff Foster. He's a poet in England. So I heard about this from some comment in the New York Times. So I looked it up. Anyway, it's called You Will Lose Everything by Jeff Foster. You will lose everything. Your money, your power, your fame, your success, perhaps even your memories. Your looks will go. Loved ones will die. Your body will fall apart. Everything that seems permanent is impermanent and will be smashed. Experience will gradually, or not so gradually, strip away everything that it can strip away. Waking up means facing this reality with open eyes and no longer turning away. But right now, we stand on sacred and holy ground, for that which will be lost has not yet been lost. And realizing this is the key to unspeakable joy. Whoever or whatever is in your life right now has not yet been taken away from you. This may sound trivial, obvious, like nothing, but really it is the key to everything. The why and how and wherefore of existence. Impermanence has already rendered everything and everyone around you so deeply holy and significant and worthy of your heartbreaking gratitude. Loss has already transfigured your life into an altar. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And the one big word that is present with me right now after the poem, but after our whole time together right now, dear Shelley, is the word love. Another infinity.
That's right.
Thank you so much for sharing. This is going to be so helpful to so many people. I know it's helpful to me. And namaste.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I just say to people goodbye for now. I hope to encounter your spirit again.